I asked my daughter to share her wedding with her pregnant sister. She refused. So I slapped her. Now she's erased me from her life forever. Please stay with me as I tell you what really happened. If this story makes you feel something, I'd be grateful if you could show your support by liking, subscribing, and sharing it with people close to you. My name is Olivia. I'm in my late 50s, and I raised my 2 daughters on my own after losing my husband many years ago. Life was never easy, but I worked every job I could to make sure my girls had food, clothes, and school supplies. I thought I was doing the right thing, but maybe I didn't always see them for who they really were. Sarah, my oldest, is 27. She's always been strong-willed, independent, and very particular about everything she does. She plans things down to the last detail, and when she got engaged, she immediately started organizing her dream wedding. She had lists, binders, and budgets. Everything was under her control. Then there was Elizabeth, my younger daughter. She's 24 and has always been more delicate in my eyes. She was the kind of child who needed reassurance, who leaned on me more, and who I often felt had to be protected. When she told me she was pregnant, unmarried, and scared, my heart broke. I couldn't help but compare her situation to Sarah's. One daughter had everything planned and perfect, while the other seemed fragile, lost, and in need of saving. As a mother, I thought I knew best. I believed Sarah had been given more than enough already. A fiancé who adored her, a wedding she dreamed about, and a life neatly laid out. Elizabeth, on the other hand, was vulnerable. She didn't have a partner standing by her side the same way, and she needed family more than ever. I thought it was only fair that Sarah could bend a little, share her big day, and make room for her sister. So, one evening, while Sarah was talking about the flowers she wanted at the reception, I brought it up. I told her we could save money and keep the family together if we combined the wedding reception with Elizabeth's baby shower. I thought it was a reasonable idea. Why spend on 2 big events when one could bring everyone together? But the moment I said it, Sarah froze. She looked at me with a kind of disbelief that made my stomach twist. "This is my day, Mom," she said firmly. "I've worked for this, paid for it, and I won't share it with anyone." Her words stung. I felt like she was turning her back not just on me, but on her sister too. I thought, how could she be so selfish when her own blood needed her? Elizabeth sat silently, her hands resting on her stomach, her eyes on the floor. She didn't defend Sarah, but she didn't defend me either. And that was when the tension truly began to build. In my heart, I believed I was fighting to keep the family together. But to Sarah, it was the first crack in something that would eventually shatter us apart. "This is my day, Mom. I've worked for it, paid for it, and I won't share it with anyone." That was Sarah's answer to me when I asked her to combine her wedding with Elizabeth's baby shower. The words cut deeper than I expected. It wasn't just the refusal. It was the sharp tone, the way she looked at me as though I was unreasonable for even suggesting it. I felt the ground shift beneath us, like something between us had cracked wide open. I tried to reason with her. I told her she had everything already, the venue, the fiancé, the future she dreamed of, and that her sister didn't have much at all. Elizabeth was struggling, and this could have been a chance for Sarah to step up and show her love. Instead, Sarah folded her arms and shook her head. "No, Mom, you're not listening. This is mine. I won't share it." I stood there stunned, and my heart hardened. To me, it wasn't just about the wedding. It felt like Sarah was turning her back on her family. After everything I had sacrificed as a single mother, after all the years of working and fighting for them, I couldn't believe she would be so selfish. Elizabeth sat in the corner that day, hands folded in her lap, her eyes darting between us. She didn't say a word in Sarah's defense. Her silence was deafening. If she had spoken up, maybe told me that Sarah was right, that the wedding was her sister's special day, perhaps I would have seen things differently. But she stayed quiet, and in that quiet, I felt more justified. To me, her silence was agreement. I lashed out, accusing Sarah of not caring about her sister. I told her she had always been like this, thinking only of herself, believing she was above the rest of us. "You've always acted like you're better," I snapped, the words slipping out before I could stop them. The truth is, deep inside, I had been holding on to that resentment for years. Sarah was the child who excelled in school, who always seemed to know what she wanted, who never asked for help. People praised her, relatives admired her, and I could never shake the feeling that she thought she was somehow superior. To me, to Elizabeth, maybe even to our whole family. Elizabeth, on the other hand, needed me. She leaned on me, trusted me, let me guide her. And maybe that's why I favored her, though I never admitted it out loud. I told myself it was because she was fragile, but in truth, it gave me a sense of purpose. With Sarah, I often felt left out, unnecessary, like she didn't need me anymore. So when she refused my request, it wasn't just about a wedding. It felt like confirmation of everything I had believed about her for years, that she was selfish, proud, and unwilling to make space for anyone else. In that moment, I saw her not as my daughter, but as someone tearing the family apart. and I let my anger blind me to what was really happening. The tension had been building for weeks, and by the time we all sat down for that family dinner, it felt like the air itself was heavy with unspoken words. I told myself I wouldn't bring it up again, not in front of everyone. But as the conversation drifted toward Sarah's wedding plans, I couldn't keep quiet. The thought of her refusing me, refusing her sister, still burned inside my chest. I leaned forward at the table, my voice cutting through the laughter. Sarah, I just don't understand why you can't share your day. Elizabeth needs us right now. She's alone, she's having a baby, and this could bring us together. The chatter around us died down. Relatives turned their heads toward us, forks pausing midair. Sarah stiffened, her eyes narrowing at me. We already talked about this, Mom, she said quietly, though her tone was sharp. I said no. Why are you bringing this up here? But I didn't stop. The more I looked at her, the more I saw stubbornness, selfishness. Because you're making a mistake, I said, my voice rising. Family should come first. You act like this wedding is only about you, but you have a sister who needs you. Don't you care about her at all? Sarah's face flushed red. I knew I had struck a nerve, but I kept pressing, ignoring the warning looks from across the table. Elizabeth won't say it, but she deserves to be celebrated too. Why can't you share? Why must everything always be your way? That was when Sarah snapped. She pushed her chair back, her voice shaking but loud enough to fill the room. You never supported me, Mom. Never. Everything has always been about Elizabeth. Her struggles, her problems, her needs. And what about me? I worked for everything I have, and still, it's not enough for you. The words pierced me, but before I could think, my hand moved. I slapped her across the face. The sound echoed against the walls, sharp and shocking. For a moment, the entire table froze. Knives and forks clinked as people lowered them, eyes wide with disbelief. Sarah held her cheek, tears welling up in her eyes. She didn't say another word. She just looked at me, hurt, broken, and then turned away. Without finishing her meal, she stood up and walked out of the room, her footsteps heavy, her shoulders trembling. The silence that followed was unbearable. No one moved. No one spoke. I looked toward Elizabeth, expecting her to say something, anything. But she sat still, her lips pressed tight, her gaze fixed on her plate. She didn't defend me, and she didn't defend her sister either. That silence was worse than Sarah's outburst. It left me exposed, standing alone in front of family who now saw me not as a mother trying to hold her daughters together, but as the woman who had just humiliated her own child in front of everyone. And in that moment, though I didn't admit it to myself, something inside our family cracked for good. The night after that dinner, I thought things would settle down. Families fight, tempers flare, and then usually words smooth things over. That's how I imagined it would go. But the next morning, when I picked up my phone to call Sarah, the line went straight to voicemail. I tried again and again, only to hear the same automated message. By the afternoon, I realized she had blocked me. My own daughter had shut me out. I couldn't believe it. It was just one slap. Yes, maybe I'd lost control in the moment, but she had provoked me, embarrassed me in front of everyone. How could she erase me from her life over that? I told myself she was just being dramatic, blowing things out of proportion like she always did when things didn't go her way. Days turned into weeks. Each time I dialed her number, I was met with silence. Texts never delivered. She had cut me off completely. I even went as far as leaving messages with relatives, asking them to tell Sarah to call me, but nothing worked. The harder I pushed, the further she pulled away. Soon, the whispers started. Cousins, aunts, and even my sister called me up, their voices full of disappointment. Olivia, how could you do that to her? In front of everyone, one of them asked. She's your daughter. You humiliated her. Another relative told me Sarah had left the dinner in tears and said she never wanted to see me again. Instead of softening me, their words only made me angrier. I felt like everyone had turned against me, siding with Sarah as though I hadn't sacrificed my whole life for her and her sister. I told them they didn't understand the full story, that Sarah had been cruel first, that she'd thrown years of resentment in my face. It wasn't just a slap, I argued. It was a mother trying to correct a selfish child. Elizabeth stayed mostly quiet in those weeks, but one evening she came to me when the house was quiet. She sat on the edge of my bed, her hands folded nervously. Mom, she said gently, maybe you went too far. Maybe you should try to apologize. Her words startled me. I expected her loyalty, her support. Hadn't I always been the one who stood by her, who defended her when others criticized? You don't understand, I snapped back. Your sister has always acted like she's above us. She needed to be reminded where she came from. Elizabeth didn't argue. She just lowered her eyes, looking hurt, and left the room without another word. But her silence lingered in my mind. A small part of me wondered if she was right, if maybe I had crossed a line that couldn't be uncrossed. Still, I buried that thought beneath pride. I told myself Sarah would come around eventually, that this phase of anger would pass. But deep down, something told me it wouldn't. Months passed, and I kept waiting for Sarah to soften. I told myself that eventually she would pick up the phone, that no daughter could stay angry at her mother forever. But as spring turned into summer and her wedding day drew closer, the silence between us only grew louder. I checked the mailbox every day, half expecting to see an invitation tucked inside, but it never came. One afternoon, while visiting my sister, I overheard my cousin talking about the wedding. She mentioned the venue, the colors, even the menu. My chest tightened. "I haven't received an invitation yet," I said carefully, hoping maybe there had been a mistake. The table went quiet. Then my cousin glanced at me with pity in her eyes and said, "Olivia, Sarah made it clear. She doesn't want you there." The words hit me harder than I thought possible. My own daughter had banned me from her wedding. Not forgotten, not delayed ban. I felt betrayed in a way I couldn't explain. Weddings are supposed to be family celebrations, a day where a mother sees her child step into a new life. And yet, Sarah was shutting me out completely, as though I was no longer part of her story. It felt like she was erasing me from her life with one decision. When I confronted Elizabeth about it, she looked torn. She shifted uncomfortably, clearly caught between us. "Mom, Sarah's still hurt," she explained. "She doesn't think she can have peace on her wedding day if you're there." "That's nonsense," I snapped. "I'm her mother. How can she walk down the aisle without me there? How can she let strangers sit and watch while I'm excluded?" My voice cracked with anger and pain, but Elizabeth didn't back down. She tried to mediate, reaching out to her sister on my behalf, but Sarah refused to budge. One evening, Elizabeth came back to me with tears in her eyes. "I tried, Mom," she whispered, "but Sarah said you crossed a line she'll never forgive." I couldn't believe it. Never forgive? For one moment, one mistake? In my mind, it was just a slap, just a heated argument. Mothers and daughters fight. That's part of life. How could she hold on to it so tightly that she'd cut me out of her wedding entirely? As the day drew closer, my resentment hardened. I imagined her walking down the aisle, her father absent because life had taken him, and now her mother absent because she chose it that way. It felt like betrayal stacked on betrayal. I told myself Sarah was being cruel, punishing me more than I deserved. But beneath my anger, a quiet ache spread through me. The truth was, I longed to be there, to see her in her dress, to stand by her as she started her new life. But that wish was denied, and no matter how I tried to twist it in my head, the reality remained the same. My daughter had shut the door on me, and I wasn't invited in. The morning of Sarah's wedding came, but instead of excitement or joy, I woke with a heaviness pressing down on my chest. The house was quiet, too quiet. No flowers, no dress waiting to be worn, no chatter of relatives getting ready. Just me, sitting at the kitchen table with a cold cup of coffee, staring at the clock as if it had betrayed me too. I kept imagining the scene I wasn't allowed to witness. Sarah walking down the aisle in her gown, the music swelling. Every eye turned toward her while I sat miles away, shut out. The thought made my stomach twist. How could she do this to me? I gave her life, raised her alone, sacrificed more than she would ever understand. And yet, on the most important day of her life, she had chosen to erase me. I tried to distract myself, but every tick of the clock dragged me back to the ceremony I wasn't part of. I pictured Michael standing there at the altar, smiling as Sarah walked toward him. I imagined the way his family must have looked at her, proud, welcoming her into their fold as though she belonged more to them than she did to me. Each thought was like a dagger, and still I couldn't stop torturing myself with the images. By evening, the phone began to buzz. Relatives who had attended the wedding called, not to comfort me, but to gush about what I had missed. "It was beautiful, Olivia. Absolutely perfect," one of them said, their voice full of awe. Sarah looked radiant. The dress suited her so well. And Michael's family, oh, they just adore her. Every word was salt in the wound. I forced myself to respond politely, but inside I was burning. Radiant? Perfect? Adored? They spoke as though she had blossomed without me, as though my absence had made no difference at all. It felt like she had replaced me not only as her mother, but as a presence in her life. Michael's family seemed to fill the role I had once held, and worse, they did it gladly. Later that night, another cousin sent me a picture. Against my better judgment, I opened it. There was Sarah, standing hand in hand with Michael, her smile wide and unshaken, her eyes sparkling with happiness. She looked complete, whole, and I wasn't part of that picture at all. My chest tightened with rage and grief. I wanted to believe she would regret excluding me, that one day she would look back and wish I had been there. But the truth stared me in the face. She didn't need me. She had built a new family, a new life, and she was radiant without her mother. Sitting alone in my empty house, I felt replaced, enraged, abandoned. The silence around me was suffocating, and for the first time, I wondered if I had truly lost her forever. When Elizabeth's baby was born, I thought my heart had finally found healing. The first time I held that tiny bundle in my arms, I felt a rush of warmth I hadn't felt in years. I kissed her soft cheeks and whispered promises into her little ears, that I would always be there, that she would never feel unloved, that this was my second chance to do everything right. Every morning I rushed to Elizabeth's house, eager to help. I cooked meals, folded laundry, and rocked the baby to sleep whenever she cried. I poured all the affection I could into that child, imagining that through her, I could rebuild what I had lost with Sarah. I told myself that if Sarah wanted to erase me, then this granddaughter would keep me alive in Elizabeth's family. But as the weeks passed, my joy began to collide with my bitterness. I couldn't help myself. Every time Elizabeth and I sat together, I brought up Sarah. If the baby smiled, I'd say, "Sarah never smiled that much as a baby." If the baby cried, I'd sigh and mutter, "At least she won't grow up selfish like her aunt." My words were laced with resentment, though I didn't see it at the time. Elizabeth's face would tighten each time. At first, she stayed quiet, brushing it off, but gradually I noticed her pulling away. She stopped calling me over as often. When I dropped by, she looked uneasy, as though my presence was a weight instead of comfort. One afternoon, as I cradled the baby and absent-mindedly complained about how Sarah hadn't even acknowledged the birth, Elizabeth suddenly took the child from my arms. Her voice trembled, but her eyes were steady. "Mom, I don't want my child growing up around so much resentment." Her words stunned me. I tried to laugh it off, saying, "I'm just being honest. You know how your sister is." But Elizabeth shook her head. "This isn't about her. It's about us. About my baby. I don't want her growing up hearing bitterness every time you open your mouth. I want her to feel love, not anger." The room fell silent. I watched my daughter hold her own child close, protecting her from me, and for the first time I realized how far I was pushing her away. I wanted to protest, to argue that I was the one who had been wronged, but her words rang in my ears like a warning bell. I had thought Elizabeth was my safe place, the daughter who would never leave me, the one who would always need me. But now I could feel her slipping too. Each bitter word I spoke about Sarah was building a wall between us, and Elizabeth was beginning to choose peace for her baby over closeness with me. Sitting there, I felt the weight of loss pressing down again. I had already lost Sarah, and now, without even realizing it, I was losing Elizabeth too. I thought at the very least, even if Sarah wanted nothing to do with me, Elizabeth would remain by my side. I had stood up for her all her life, defended her when others criticized her choices, and poured myself into caring for her baby. She was supposed to be my comfort, the one who stayed loyal when everyone else walked away. But one afternoon, while having coffee with an old friend, I heard something that made my blood run cold. She mentioned, almost casually, that she had seen Sarah and Elizabeth together at the park. Sarah was holding the baby, smiling, while Elizabeth pushed the stroller. My friend assumed I already knew, but in that moment I realized the truth. I hadn't been told. At first, I refused to believe it. Elizabeth would have told me if Sarah had reached out. But when I confronted her later, the guilt written all over her face confirmed everything. Sarah had come to see the baby, and Elizabeth had welcomed her. They had been meeting in secret, rebuilding a bond one thought was shattered forever. And all the while, I had been left in the dark. The betrayal cut deep. Elizabeth was the daughter I had always protected, the one I thought understood me. Yet here she was choosing Sarah, the very daughter who had erased me. I felt like a fool, giving so much of myself while she quietly slipped out of my grasp. Anger consumed me. "How could you do this to me?" I shouted. "After everything I've done for you, after I defended you when no one else would, you go behind my back and run to her? Do you have any idea how ungrateful that is?" Elizabeth's eyes filled with tears, but she didn't back down. She held her baby close, her voice trembling but firm. "Mom, this isn't about gratitude. This is about family. Sarah is my sister. My child deserves to know her aunt. I'm not going to let your bitterness keep us apart." Her words only fueled my fury. "Bitterness? You think I'm bitter? I gave up everything for you girls, and this is how you repay me? By betraying me?" That was when she broke. Her voice rose, sharp and raw. "You don't love us, Mom. You just want to control us." The room went silent after that. I stared at her, unable to believe what she had said. My own daughter, accusing me of not loving her. But deep inside, her words struck a nerve I didn't want to face. I wanted to argue, to tell her she was wrong, that all I had ever done was for their good. But the way she looked at me, with exhaustion, with disappointment, told me she no longer believed it. For the first time, I saw that I was no longer the center of her world. She was choosing Sarah, and in doing so, she was leaving me behind. The silence in my life grew heavier with each passing week. At first, I told myself Elizabeth would call, that she would eventually calm down and realize she had overreacted. But the phone stayed quiet. No texts, no visits, not even a picture of the baby. When I tried to call her, the line rang and rang until voicemail picked up. I left messages that went unanswered, then shorter ones, then nothing at all. Sarah, of course, remained unreachable. I had long since accepted that she blocked me, but knowing that Elizabeth had now joined her made the rejection feel unbearable. Both my daughters, gone from my life, as if I no longer existed to them. The pain sharpened during birthdays and holidays. I baked a cake on Sarah's birthday out of habit, but no one came to eat it. I wrapped a gift for Elizabeth's baby at Christmas and left it by the tree, untouched, as the house echoed with silence. The traditions I once clung to became cruel reminders of what I had lost. Meanwhile, my relatives drifted further away too. At family gatherings, I was no longer invited, or if I was, it felt half-hearted, as though they were including me out of obligation. When I asked about Sarah or Elizabeth, their responses were clipped. "They're doing fine," they'd say, or, "You should try reaching out." But their eyes told me more. They had already taken sides, and it wasn't mine. One cousin finally said it outright. "Olivia, you need to stop holding on to this bitterness. They're happy now. Why can't you just let go?" Her words stung. To them, I was the problem, the bitter mother who couldn't move on. I wanted to scream that they didn't understand, that my daughters had turned on me without reason, that I had only ever acted out of love. But the more I insisted, the more I felt their patience thin. One by one, relatives pulled away, tired of listening to me repeat the same complaints. Left alone, I had no choice but to sit with my thoughts. Some nights, staring at the ceiling, I wondered if I truly had become the villain of my own family story. But pride would not let me admit it out loud. Instead, I convinced myself there had to be another explanation. I told myself Sarah had poisoned Elizabeth against me, filling her head with lies, twisting every memory to make me seem cruel. I imagined long conversations between them where they painted me as controlling, unforgiving, heartless. It was easier to believe they had brainwashed each other than to face the possibility that my own actions had pushed them away. And so I sat, day after day, in the emptiness of my house. I was cut off from my daughters, from my grandchildren, from the family I had once believed I held together. In the silence, I felt like a shadow of myself, clinging to the belief that I was the wronged one, even as everyone else saw me as the villain. Years slipped by faster than I ever expected. At first, I marked the time by the holidays I spent alone, then by the birthdays I no longer celebrated. Eventually, the months blurred together until I could barely remember the last time I'd heard either of my daughters' voices. The phone calls stopped long ago, the texts never came, and my house grew quieter with each passing season. News of their lives reached me only in fragments, carried through distant relatives who still pitied me enough to share. One day, I overheard that Sarah had become a mother, my first grandchild from her, and yet I hadn't even known she was pregnant. By the time I learned, the child was already months old, smiling, growing, living a life where I had no place. I tried not to picture Sarah cradling her baby, looking down with the kind of love I once imagined sharing. But the image haunted me anyway. Elizabeth, too, slipped further away. In the early years, I still saw her baby now and then, still felt like I was part of their world. But slowly, her visits became less frequent until they stopped altogether. She stopped answering my messages, stopped returning my calls, until all I had left were memories of when she used to sit across from me, letting me hold her little girl. Now, even that part of my life was gone. The house I once filled with noise and family now echoed with nothing but my own footsteps. Some evenings, I would sit at the kitchen table staring at the empty chairs, wondering how it had all unraveled. I told myself, as I always had, that Sarah's selfishness was the start of it all, that if she had agreed to share her wedding day, none of this would have happened. I whispered it like a prayer, clinging to the belief that one stubborn choice ruined everything. But late at night, when the bitterness gave way to silence, another truth crept in. It wasn't just Sarah's decision. It was my slap. It was my favoritism. It was my refusal to see them as equals, my insistence that one deserved more of me than the other. I told myself I was protecting Elizabeth, but in doing so, I was pushing Sarah further and further away until she finally shut the door for good. And then, blinded by pride, I let my anger poison what little I had left with Elizabeth too. Now I live surrounded by ghosts of a family I once believed I was holding together. Photographs gather dust on the walls, frozen moments from when the three of us still smile. But those days are long gone, and I know they will never return. So I sit in my quiet house, reflecting bitterly on the choices that led me here. My daughter has erased me from her life forever. And maybe, just maybe, I deserve it. Do you think Sarah was right to cut her mother out completely, or should Olivia have been given another chance to make things right? Share your thoughts down in the comments. I'd really like to hear them. And if you enjoy stories like this, remember to hit subscribe and tap the notification bell so you'll never miss the next one.